Welcome to another episode of the Drawing Science Club. I'm your host, Brenda, and today we're going to be learning about states of matter by learning how pieces of matter are made up of smaller particles and can sometimes be put together to make bigger particles, and sometimes that change can be reversed, and sometimes it can't. Here's what you'll need. At least one jar, a sponge, some water, and some borax powder. You can also use salt if you don't have borax powder. You will also either need access to a stove or a hot plate for this because the water has to be warmed. Alright, let's get started. Here we are up close, and I'm using a hot plate to heat up my water. It doesn't have to get to boiling, you just have to get hot enough to where you can dissolve the borax. So you use a ratio of 2 parts water to 1 part borax. So I've got about 2 cups of water here. So I'm gonna pour in 1 cup of borax after the water. Then you just let this heat and dissolve. And once the powder is dissolved into the water, you can pour it into your jar. I cut my sponge into little pieces. We'll cut them into the pieces about this big, and I'm gonna put 2 in each jar. I'm gonna make 2 jars. So here's my jar with borax water, and I'm gonna add in my sponges. We're gonna give it a couple hours for the crystals to form. Then we're gonna see if we can dissolve them again once they form crystals. So I'll meet you back here in a couple hours. I'm just gonna take these out and dry them on a paper towel. Here they are dried. You can see the crystals have formed. Here are the crystals on the sponges. And now we're gonna put them inside some water and see if we can get them to go down into smaller size particles again. So this is going to be a test to see if we can get borax to turn from powder to solids and then turn back to powder. So I've got a little hot plate here, and I'm going to get this water warm, and then we're going to put the crystals in. Okay, our water's nice and hot, so now we're going to put in our crystals, and we're going to see if we can get them to turn back into the borax powder particles. Got a little spoon here we're going to use to stir. The sponges are softening, so it feels like it might be working. The water has started to cool, and now our sponges are squishy again. So now it's time to do the test to see if the borax crystals turn back into powder. There's no more crystals on the sponge. As a reminder, this is what they looked like after we had formed the crystals. And then here's what it looks like now after being soaked in hot water. This has crystals all over it, and this one doesn't. So now what we're going to do to see if the particles have turned, if the crystals have turned back into powder, is you need something black, like a piece of paper or styrofoam. And then you're gonna squeeze out a little bit of the liquid onto the surface of the black thing. Then you let the water completely evaporate. This can take a few minutes. Here's what it looks like wet. And here it is after. You can see the white residue of the borax crystals turning back to powder. And I don't know if you can see on my fingers, but there's also white powder residue on my fingers from squeezing the sponge. So here's what we learned in our experiment. When we first started, we had this white borax powder. Then we heated it in water and soaked it in a sponge, and we got these borax crystals. Then we heated it in water again and took the crystals and broke them back down into small particles, which are evidenced on this tray by this white film that's remaining and the white powder on my fingers. So from this experiment, we can conclude that borax is something that can be changed by heat into one thing and then changed back again to its original state by adding heat again. Some particles can change forms this way, and some can't. Here's the science. Every object that you see is made up of particles known as atoms. Atoms are very tiny particles that chemically bond together and make up molecules. Molecules then make up pieces of matter. They make up gas, they make up liquid, they make up solids. Every piece of matter in the world is made up of these small atoms. There's a funny joke that you've probably seen that says, "Don't trust an atom because they make up everything." Of course, the joke there is atoms are part of all the matter in the earth. So everything is made of atoms, therefore they make up everything. By changing the external forces on some types of matter, we can change the physical properties of that matter or change it in some other way. Changes can be done through temperature changes. They can be done through dissolving or freezing an object, or by mixing it with other materials. In our experiment, we played the role of making bigger pieces of matter from smaller pieces of matter by making borax crystals. Borax comes in a powder shape, but when you add it to water, you dissolve it into water and you add heat and you put a catalyst inside of that solution, then as the mixture cools, the borax crystals clump together and make larger molecules. This is the same thing as what happens with any type of matter. Atoms are much, much smaller than borax powder, but they collect together and make bigger things. By changing the external force on our borax crystals, we were able to change its shape. First, we were able to make the crystals by heating them up and evaporating the water, and then we were able to redissolve them by reintroducing warm water and turning it back into a dissolved liquid. A lot of things that we use today are made up of smaller pieces. Just think about how Legos can be made to build a Lego set from tiny bricks. We build houses from bricks. We build computers and electronics from small wires and little electrical pieces. Often, heating or cooling an object can change its properties in some way. Sometimes these changes can be reversed, like in our borax experiment, and sometimes they can't. Think about a piece of paper. When you burn a piece of paper, it changes into a different type of matter. It changes from the paper into carbon and gases, but you can't reverse that. You can't unburn paper. Whereas in our experiment, it was reversible because when we reheated our crystals, they melted back down. So that is a reversible change, whereas the burning paper is not. That's it for today. See you next time.